Hello guys, I'm John, I'm the Geeky Fanboy, and welcome back to our re-review of Mr. Robot. We're at episode 2 now, called Ones and Zeros, and just as a first thing, I'm glad that I'm actually trying to keep this up, so this is going to be a regular thing, and I hope you enjoy this rewatch just as much as me. I bet there are a bunch of you who have already rewatched the series since the finale back in December. So come and join me as we revisit the second episode of season 1. Also, just as a general reminder, this series is 5 years old at this point. We have all seen the finale, I assume. If you watch this episode, this video, you have seen the finale. So, spoilers everywhere. I'm going to talk about everything that's happened. I'm going to mention things that happened in future seasons. So there's sort of a retrospect thing. Rewatching the series as someone who knows what's going to happen in the future. So let's get right into it. So the episode opens right where the first episode ended. We're in the board meeting room. Tyrell has offered Elliot a position at Evil Corp. I like here in the dialogue this little hint due to the choice of words Tyrell has, where he says to Elliot, and when you decide to join, when that happens, like he's not saying if you decide to do this or if you want to. Like I just think this is a nice touch where you can just see what type of character Tyrell really is, that he uses these words because he's so self-assured and he's not used to hearing no from people when he offers something to them. And I also really appreciate, again, Rami Malek's acting in this scene, because you can really see how uncomfortable he is during this entire conversation, especially when Tyrell sends everyone else out and it's just the two of them. And Tyrell really comes into Elliot's personal space, and I love how you can see this anxiety and introvertedness of Elliot coming to the front, where he really turns away and doesn't look at Tyrell. I'm just appreciating these little details in Rami Malek's acting, where you really feel like this is an authentic representation of Elliot, who's someone with social anxiety and someone who's very nervous about interacting with other people. So I really like that there. And you again can see here how Tyrell tries to also manipulate people, not just through his words, but also by directly approaching them, where you can see, okay, I can't really get to him, but as soon as he's alone with him, he invades his personal space, tries to get close to him, as he tries to get him into agreeing to his offer. And what I like then how the scene ends is Elliot just says, no, I think I'm happy where I am. And Tyrell sort of turns away and walks back to the window front, and Elliot doesn't see him, but I like that we get this shot of not really of Tyrell's face, but we sort of see him from the side, and we can see that he looks clearly upset about Elliot saying no, and I like that we here have Tyrell hiding his true feelings about how he feels towards Elliot and towards the offer he made. That he consciously has to turn away from Elliot and not show him his face so he can express this disappointment, but he doesn't want Elliot to see it. Here I also feel like I have to once again compliment the music choices, which are, I think, great throughout the entire series. But here again we have this use of very grand, epic orchestra music that is sort of underlying this entire conversation, but really builds up the tension throughout this discussion between Elliot and Tyrell, and it slowly builds up, and we have this big crescendo at the end of the conversation, and then we go the title screen and everything. And I just like how the music here is used to really emphasize the tension of the scene that we're watching. And yeah, this transitions to Elliot in a car talking to these weird guys in black suits. We get it's a kind of funny but also awkward conversation where the man in the suit is making a reference to a film that Elliot obviously hasn't seen, and Elliot gets out, and what we see then is our first look at Vera, who just, as a general thing, fuck Vera. Vera is a fucking wanker. He can sort off. I just, even like his first short appearance in this, like we see Elliot walking down the street towards his flat, and we see Shayla interacting with Vera, where we at first think, okay, Vera might be sort of a kind of boyfriend who's a bit pushy, but it's more than him just being pushy. He's like, you already get a hint that, okay, Vera is really not a nice guy. And I'm appreciating here Elliot a little. Are you okay? Is everything good when as soon as Vera is away? Like that he sort of checks in on Shayla, making sure that she's all right. I like that. And then again, we also get to see how sweet Shayla is. I just think she's such a nice and sweet person. Like you can see how she cares about Elliot. Like when he asks about the drugs and he wants to get more, you can see that she's really upset about it. He asks her for more when she says, "No, I can't give the stuff to you because I promised you I can't give you the morphine if I don't have your Suboxone." And I like that you can see that she does actually care about him, even though she's the one who gives him the drugs. So I really like this friendship and later relationship they share, because you can really see that while they are a bit different, you can see how much they care for each other, especially like from Shayla's side. You can see how sweet she is towards Elliot, because she can see how much he struggles, but she wants to help him, and I just like how supportive they are of one another. But regardless of all that, Elliot gets his drugs, but he gets his morphine, but not his counter drugs, not his Suboxone, and he goes up to his flat. And what we then get is we get the reintroduction of the fourth wall break, where Elliot very smartly, I think, says, "What you think I forgot about you? You still there?" I like that because throughout the entire opening, like the first 10 minutes maybe of the episode doesn't have any narration whatsoever. So I like that we get this sort of reintroduction of it, because you might think, okay, there's like maybe a little gimmick we do for like the first episode, and it's not going to be a reoccurring thing. But I like that we here get the reintroduction of it, where Elliot makes sure that we are with him, that we are indeed part of this story, that he like checks in on us. And then we see Elliot using the drugs, and I like that we can here see already this slowly spiraling out of control in regards to his drug use, because not only does he use the morphine without having some oxygen ready, but he even says himself that he's taking too much of it. He says like, "Yeah, I know, I'm taking too much. I know I promised Shayla, blah blah blah, but this is an emergency." Where I think it's kind of interesting to see where in the first season, Elliot is very much dependent on stuff like this, on the escapism, and that he gives himself excuses so he can actually indulge himself in this very hurtful behavior, which I think is kind of interesting to see, especially if we take into regard the character development he goes through, especially in like season 4, where I think season 4 Elliot wouldn't do this at all, but I think like in the beginning here you can still see how this mental illness is still very much having a hold on Elliot, that he, knowingly gives himself excuses where he is able to take drugs even though he knows he shouldn't. So I think this is a very nice touch, especially if you know how his character ends up later in season 4. Then we get a hacking scene again. He decides to hack Tyrell, but realizes that it was probably too easy, and we see him destroying all of his computer stuff, which had me wondering for a second, how is this man able to afford so much computer stuff if he like occasionally destroys everything he has? Like, I don't know how much money does he earn. Like, it is, I mean, I'm guessing his job at Allsafe is pretty good, but he has high-tech equipment. I was just wondering that he just has to spend so much money again how to get all this new tech stuff. And while he does that, he finds a photograph of him being a kid together with his mother. And what I thought was interesting here is that shortly later, we see him going outside with Flipper. By the way, Flipper, adorable, best doggo. He goes outside, wants to take Flipper for walk, throws the trash out, and we see him when he throws the trash out that he's holding the photograph as well, and clearly intended to throw it away as well. But he looks at it and seems to have like a last minute realization and takes it again, which had me wondering, since we now know that the mother is another personality within Elliot's head, it had me wondering for a second if this was maybe the mom intervening. That, it was either Hoodie Elliot or Kid Elliot looking at this photograph and thinking, I don't want to be reminded of this awful relationship I had with my mother. And that he wanted to throw the photo away, but then decided not to do it because in this moment of, which is, I guess, sort of emotional for him. If you think about the abusive relationship he's had with his mother, that maybe for a second, like, the mother personality sort of slipped in there and was like, we're not going to throw the photograph away because I'm in this and we had a special relationship regardless of what happened between us. So maybe the mother personality made him keep the photograph. I don't know. I just thought it was an interesting little touch there. And Elliot goes back to Allsafe. We also see here again the drug use, where we see how excessive it's slowly becoming, where he even starts using it while he's at work. He goes to talk to Gideon. He is supposed to get a raise, which is nice, I guess. But the important thing is Gideon mentions that F Society made demands and published a new video, and Elliot doesn't know anything about that. Where again, I think it's interesting to see that we see how shared memories work between Elliot and Mr. Raw, because when Elliot sees the video, it's clearly like Christian Slater doing the thing. You can hear it in the voice, so it's Mr. Robot doing the video, which ergo means Elliot was actually doing the video. But I like here again that we see that Elliot doesn't remember anything about this, even though he was theoretically there. So again, here it's kind of interesting to watch this in retrospect, where okay, Mr. Robot is actually Elliot, but we see how shared memory in this case doesn't work yet, where Mr. Robot is not yet prepared to really share these kinds of important memories with Elliot. Thus, Elliot being rightly confused when the F Society video gets published. So then Elliot gets back home, but he notices that someone is in his flat, and it turns out it's Darlene, and obviously he is very confused. He's like, how do you know where I live? How did you get in? Why the hell are you in my shower? And what I love here, again, is how you can, if you know, how he can just tell that Darlene is in on it. Like, she knows, because again, her conversation with Elliot is very casual. Like, she's very much in the know. She's like, yeah, of course I know. Why shouldn't I know where you live? And for her, it's very understandable that she would just go to her brother's flat, that she would know where he lives and take a shower there, because they actually share like a very casual relationship as siblings. I just like that you can see in the dialogue how Darlene treats Elliot and just how she talks. And you can see that she knows, because she doesn't treat him any differently. She's like, yeah, we probably had this conversation at some point, and why shouldn't I know where you live? Where you can just tell that they probably had this kind of conversation before, and Darlene must have noticed at some point Elliot is occasionally very confused as to what she's doing, but that she doesn't care. So Elliot and Darlene make their way back to the F Society headquarters, and there we get to see Mr. Robot again, and here I think they're very cleverly using the editing, the choreography of the actors to kind of give us hints of the reveal that comes in later in season 1. Because I noticed that when Darlene starts talking to Elliot again, and we know that Mr. Robot is there, and she's addressing him as, the leader of F Society, it's Mr. Robot like directly walking into the scene and standing in front of Elliot as soon as the conversation shifts, and he is the one who has to talk about it because he has the knowledge. I just love those little visual hints where you if you pay attention, you can already sort of tell that something's going on, but especially if you know the reveal that's coming later, it just makes you a bit giggly, because you can just tell that this is them saying to us, oh, this is Mr. Robot right now, literally standing in front of Elliot. He is taking over the conversation and giving the answer. I just think that is such smart and visual storytelling. And yeah, we get the explanation of the plan, what F Society is planning on doing. We get, it was just like a throwaway line, but when Mr. Robot talks about some of the other hackers in the group, and he turns to the Muslim girl, Trenton or something, I think her name is, and he says, "We, you gotta be a bit weary of her. She definitely has got some Allahu Akbar inside her." And I was like, "What? What did you just say?" Wow, like casual Islamophobia much. Well, I was wondering. This was already problematic back in 2015. I'm not sure if this line would work at all nowadays. I'm just wondering, wow. Or you can just have, wow, Mr. Robot, bit of a problematic character trait right there. He's just throwing that out so casually. It was just like a very casual throwaway line meant as a joke, but it just sort of caught me off guard because if you think about it, it's like, okay, those words were just said. While they're explaining the plan, what they're going to do, we also get our first mention of the Dark Army. We don't really know what they are. We just hear that the Dark Army is a group of hackers that hack for anyone as long as they, get what they want. So they hack for countries, for individuals, for like basically everyone, as Elliot says. And we also, I think, get another hint at this later with Cisco. We're going to talk about him in a couple of minutes. And I like how Mr. Robot here, where you can see again how slightly manipulative he is towards Elliot, where again we have this repetition of this world-saving theme, where Mr. Robot says, "Oh, Elliot, if you do this, you can change the world, what you always dreamed about." Where again we have this hint of, Elliot, especially Hoodie Elliot, their personality changing the world. We already heard it in the very first episode where we hear in the one monologue, "Sometimes I dream about saving the world." And we know that in season 4 we hear Fancy Pants Elliot saying, "I invented this hero persona of myself that could save the world with their skills." It's just interesting to see how this is sort of a reoccurring theme. And how Mr. Robot very cleverly, especially since he is a part of Elliot's head, like he knows how he has to talk to him in order to get him into what he wants him to do. And that he's, again, using this theme of you can change the world, you can save it. And that is sort of ultimately also what gets Elliot into the whole thing. We also here get our first hint, which comes up again later as well, at Mr. Robot knowing about Elliot's father, which I think is quite interesting. It's also again a bit of a throwaway line where Mr. Robot mentions Elliot's father and says, I know you're angry about them killing your father or something like that. Where it isn't questioned. It's not questioned by Elliot why Mr. Robot knows about his father, and it never really comes up that Mr. Robot maybe looked up Elliot and knows about his father or something, which is interesting because of course Mr. Robot would know about his father. He literally is a version of Elliot's father. Again, this is just like those little hints where characters like Mr. Robot know about certain things just because they are in the know, they are a part of Elliot, or they know what's actually going on, but the audience doesn't really get it yet at that point if they don't know what's happening in future episodes. I just think this is so smart because I love discovering those little hints when you watch this like in retrospect. So Elliot is sort of panicking. He is like, I'm not sure if I want to get into this. We have this little interesting speech from Mr. Robot where it's about either you're 1 or you're 0. You do something or you do nothing. It's a yes or no thing. And Elliot seems to say no, like he's very undecided as to what he wants to do. And he addresses the audience again, where he's like, "Oh shit, we have to come up with a solution. I need you to think about something." And I like that when he says, I need you to think about a solution with me. We get this very short look directly into the camera before the scene cuts away, which again I just like because I'm a big fan of this fourth wall break and this whole narration we get in Mr. Robot, where we have this direct address where not only do we hear Elliot's voice, but he like directly looks to the camera, where we really feel personally addressed by Elliot. Then we get our next scene with Vera, where Elliot is looking for Shayla. He's going into her home and like knocks at her bathroom door, wants to get in, but then we see that Vera is sitting there in the living room smoking. And this whole scene just is a perfect example of how intimidating Vera can be just through dialogue alone. Like the fact that he picks up a gun later in the scene is not even the most intimidating thing I think he does. It's just the way he is presented through the dialogue, through the acting, through the visuals, that you immediately get this very nervous feeling about him. Like how he dominates every scene he's in, every dialogue that's happening, where he, like really goes into it. Like Elliot is knocking at the door, he like wants to get into the bathroom, it's like maybe we should check on her, and Vera is immediately like, no, it's fine, you don't have to go into the door, where he sometimes says like very normal or simple things, but the way he says them, or the way it's depicted in the show, you get immediately this very off-putting feeling where you get the sensation of this guy would actually hit me in the fucking face if I did anything at all right now. And it's just very cleverly done, I think. Like also visually, he just like sits there in his underwear and nothing else, which is immediately unsettling, especially since we have Elliot there, who's like all like huddled up in his hoodie. And we have this like stark contrast with Vera just sitting there basically naked, but he's so comfortable with it. He's not like, oh, you caught me in my underwear, how uncomfortable, let me get dressed or something. No, for him it's like a very normal thing. It doesn't even get addressed, and it becomes, especially I think, even more intimidating when he like sort of also invades Elliot's personal space a bit occasionally. It just feels very unsettling. And I think it gets very interesting when Vera starts talking. He's basically the only one who talks throughout the entire dialogue. We only occasionally hear Elliot's monologue where he explains that Vera is the one who supplies Shayla with drugs. And we get a bit of background on Vera, where he also explains that he has had a history of mental illness and tried to kill himself and everything, but says that he has learned to accept this and use this as a power for himself and as a weapon, which, kind of kudos to him. If he's feeling better now and is able to use that for himself, it's just, again, the way it's presented to us, it feels so bizarre. But I couldn't help but wonder if there is a bit of a parallel going on between Vera and Elliot, because Vera does sort of have similar vibes to Elliot in the way he talks about certain things, and also in regards to the mental illness he mentions in this episode, where I was sort of wondering if Vera was like, it's almost like he is a version of Elliot, if Elliot would like totally go evil and off the rails. I just couldn't help but wonder, there is sort of an interesting contrast between these two characters going on, which I know gets explored in future episodes, and especially in season 4 later. It's also just interesting how you don't really expect him to be this not only very dangerous but also very important character who, if you think about what he does in season 4, that he's the one who reveals Elliot's trauma, it's interesting to see that he, in this first season, just seems to be this sort of, secondary sort of antagonist who is just primarily there to be the evil guy, someone we can hate, and you don't really, at least that's what I personally thought, you don't really expect him to become this sort of person he becomes in later episodes. So yeah, that was a very unsettling scene, got me very nervous, even though I knew that was gonna play out okay, mostly. Yeah, and then Elliot goes and finds Shayla in the bathroom. She's in the tub. She's unconscious. She wakes up and doesn't really know how she got there. And I have to admit, I totally forgot about how really bad the abuse got, because you can tell from the very first episode that Vera is an abusive boyfriend. I guess you could say he's definitely abusive towards Shayla, but I had completely forgotten that he full on rapes her. You don't see it, but it's said. At first it's implied, where Elliot asks Shayla, did you have sex with him? Shayla says no, and we hear Elliot in his thoughts saying, but he definitely had with you. Where you think, oh shit, not good. And then Elliot even like straight up says it in a monologue later where he says like Vera's behavior has like leveled up from like general abuse to like full on rape. I have to do something about it, which I'd completely forgotten about. That it was actually that bad, and whew, and what I like then what follows is that we again can see in this relationship Elliot has with Shayla that it is once again this connection he shares with someone he very obviously values and likes. That is the thing that makes him decide something important. Like we had this in the very first episode where it was the sexism Angela got from the CEO Terry Colby guy. That is what Elliot, what influenced Elliot to like actually rat Terry Colby out. And again, this episode, it's his relationship to Shayla and seeing how she got abused by someone, and him seeing how someone he likes getting hurt. This is what again makes Elliot take the decision to do something about it. He decides to not only like rat out Vera, which means that he doesn't get any drugs, but he also again makes a decision, I think, here to like join F Society and do something about it. I just think it's interesting to see that this is a reoccurring theme with Elliot. I think also throughout the entire season that it is his relationships to people he very obviously cares about that are most important to him and that influence a lot of his actions. That he's just trying to do good for the people he likes and often also goes out of his way to please them, taking back like his own desires, but he just wants to help the people he likes in his life. We get a scene between Angela and her boyfriend, Ollie, who have encountered a man on the street selling his music, Cisco, and he gave Ollie a CD with his music to listen to. But we will later see that this is actually meant to get a virus on, or in order to hack Ollie's computer. Also, I think this scene we get between the two of them I think shows very well that Ollie doesn't really truly care about Angela and her, especially her emotional worries she has. Like we see her trying to phone Elliot, but he doesn't answer, and you can see that she's very clearly upset about this and that she worries about her friend. But Ollie seems to be very like disregarding of her emotional worries. Where she's like, "Yeah, it's gonna be fine. We're gonna call him later, and you don't have to worry about it." And like he answers an email from like his mistress while Angela is standing in the background talking to him. It's just such a good example of seeing how Ollie is, just sort of trying to pretending to be this nice guy, but he's really not. He's just a freaking tosser. And yeah, we see him basically putting the virus on his computer, and we see that Cisco has hacked the laptop. And we don't really know anything about him at that point. But what we do see is him, first off, looking at Angela while she's in the bathroom. Not cool. And then we see him typing something in Chinese in a chat or something, which to the viewer who has never seen this show at all, it's like, oh, what's this? It's Chinese. I'm wondering why he's writing in Chinese all of a sudden. But in retrospect, you immediately, it's Dark Army stuff. And I completely forgot about Cisco and him probably being part of the Dark Army and all that. I have no idea what his whole deal was. I don't remember anything about him. But yeah, apparently he seems to be a member of the Dark Army. But again, here, I like that the show gives you hints, but it doesn't really tell you what it is. It just shows you, oh, there is something going on. But we're not gonna tell you what it is, even though the Dark Army was already mentioned in the episode, which I think is interesting that we already have the Dark Army, we have knowledge of them existing, and then we get this hint with, the writing in Chinese, but we don't know about the connection there yet. And again, here it's interesting, if you watch this in retrospect, you get the hints and you can see that there is already this first exploration of the Dark Army and of this member, Cisco. What we then get is, I think, the most interesting conversational scene in the entire episode. It's also the last scene of the episode. We see Elliot at the pier, and we see him meeting Mr. Robot, who reads a book. I don't actually know what kind of book he reads, but it seems to be like a sort of romance. I would like to know if there's any meaning to this, or what kind of book he's reading. If you know, put it down in the comments below. I would find it very interesting. And yeah, you see them starting to talk about it, like whether or not Elliot wants to rejoin F Society, where Elliot says, no, I think I have an idea of how we can do our plan without hurting anyone. And Mr. Robot seems to be a bit reluctant to let him back in. And here again, we get this mention of Elliot's father, where Mr. Robot addresses his dad. Again, where it's not really entirely questioned how Mr. Robot would know about this. Elliot just says something along the lines of, you probably looked stuff up about me on the internet anyway. That's how you know about this. But yeah, again, it doesn't really get questioned at all. And here in this episode, we get it's the first time we hear the story about how Elliot fell out the window when he was 8 years old. So he says that his father got sick, he had leukemia, but he didn't want his mother to know. So he made Elliot promised to him that he wouldn't tell anyone. But it eventually got so bad that Elliot decided, okay, I have to tell my mom. And apparently Elliot's dad got really upset about it. And Elliot wanted to apologize, wanted to hug him, but Elliot said didn't want any of it and pushed him out the window. And Elliot goes over it very matter-of-factly, which I think is interesting, where you can see just how much ingrained this, I guess, delusion or wrong, false memory is inside his brain. Where to him it seems to be very clear what has happened and why it has happened. And it's just interesting, especially if you know that the story gets picked up in future episodes, how he fell out of the window, and that this becomes this very important scene, especially in season 4 when we find out about Elliot's trauma. And I think it's also interesting how Mr. Robot in this scene reacts, that he acts very understanding, and Elliot talks about his father and how close they were. When he finishes the story, we can actually see for the first time how Mr. Robot physically interacts with Elliot, very lovingly, sort of touching him on the shoulder, rubbing his back, which I don't know if that's a hint, but it sort of got to me, especially if you know about the trauma Elliot went through as a kid. It's just, I don't know, it's just little moments like these where you feel is this a hint? Was that them trying to tell us something that we didn't actually know about it at that point? And it's just interesting to see how Mr. Robot reacts to this, because Mr. Robot is an incarnation or version of Elliot's father. It's not exactly the version of Elliot's father that abused him, but clearly Mr. Robot knows about this. He's the protector. He protects Elliot from the trauma and all the bad shit, so he knows what's going on. And it's interesting to see how he reacts to this, especially since at the end of the conversation, he again goes sort of into this manipulative, aggressive sort of mode where he says, why do you think your father did it? Did you ever think about why he reacted this badly? Do you think you deserved it? That you betrayed him? And then he pushes him off the railing and Elliot falls down. We know now that this was just Elliot talking to himself and eventually throwing himself off the cliff, basically. But I just think this is so interesting to see this, knowing that they are the same person and knowing what personality Mr. Robot is meant to be. There's just so much to this. If you watch this dialogue in retrospect, there's so many things you could get out of it. And that is where the second episode of Mr. Robot ends. I remember watching this for the first time. It was again one of those what the fuck endings, because I seriously thought at this point Mr. Robot was full on probably antagonist at this point. Why the hell did he push my boy off? Is my boy dead now? I don't know. And yeah, again, just goes to show how well Mr. Robot does endings, because they always leave you with this feeling of, oh my god, what just happened? What is going to, how are they going to resolve this? What is going to happen with the characters? There's always this very good sort of cliffhanger feeling, I guess, where you just want to know what happens, and we see so many new character interactions, I think, in this episode, especially with like Shayla and Vera, where I think like you might not even really be guessing the first time around that this is going to become like a huge thing with these characters. But yeah, I love how many like little hints and details there are for someone who already knows what's going on, but also just for someone who like just likes to pay a lot of attention to details and character building and storytelling. Yeah, like how many hints there are to what is actually going on, or how, yeah, like with subtle hints and details, the show is trying to tell you certain things or make you pay attention to certain things, even though you might not know that they are connected. And yeah, this was a wonderful follow-up episode, I think, to a great first episode. There is a lot of setup in the second episode that just leaves you there wanting to watch more, which, like I said, this series in general does really well. It just leaves you there wanting to watch more. And I'm definitely looking forward to the next episode, episode 3. What are your thoughts on this episode, the second episode? Put your thoughts down in the comments below. Have you recently rewatched the series? Tell me all about your feelings that you have while you watch this in retrospect. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.